Hello, everyone. It is Friday, August 17th. This is Kops Office Hours. I am your host and moderator, I guess, for the day, Justin Santa Barbara from Google. We have a bunch of things on the agenda, including some bigger topics. So if you do want to talk about something today, please do add it onto the agenda, because otherwise I worry we will not get to it if it is not on the agenda. You might want to slot it right above the DNS issues one. But otherwise I will... Thank you, Mike. Otherwise, I will get started. I think I have the first two items on the agenda, which I hope are the first three, but the first two are, I hope, quite fast. So we did the Kops 1.10.0 release this week. I think we did it on Wednesday. So that is now out finally. And please do try it out. Let us know if there are any issues. But thank you to everyone that worked so hard to get that finally out the door. And we are going to do a 1.11.0 alpha 1 pretty fast, because the goal is to get to catch up to the point where we are doing alpha releases closer to the alpha releases before Kubernetes itself is released. So ideally we'd be doing 1.12.0 alpha 1 right now, but we still have to catch up. So 1.11 alpha 1 coming soon. The only feature I think we're committed to getting into that, other than support for Kubernetes 1.11, is etcd migration support. So that, I believe that works in 1.10.0, but I think we have to make it per our sort of schedule for getting everyone off etcd2. We want to get it to be opt out of etcd. This will be the first release to default to using etcd manager for new clusters. So it will be opt out in 1.11, so that we can be off of it by 1.13. The hope being, of course, that we will have a lot more testing of it when it is opt-out. But yeah, so that should come soon, probably early next week, I would guess. But we'll see. And then a public service announcement. There is an Intel chip vulnerability called, I think the fancy name is Foreshadow. And so there's a new image that I put in. I did a PR for the alpha channel this morning. So hopefully you'll see that in the stable channel probably next week. But if you're not running the default image, if you specified an image, you will have to manually get the latest or get an updated version of your image from your vendor or image provider. So just be aware of that. There's also a denial of service attack at the TCP networking level. Or IP networking level, I'm not sure. But so it's a relatively important, two relatively important kernel updates coming through. And then the next item was just generally, I wanted to sync up with everyone about what our goals should be over, I guess, the next 3 to 6 months in terms of what do we want to get in. And the ones that I am most aware of are we have to do etcd3, I should write. It would be nice, I think, to get the cluster API going. We've sort of had to pull a couple of features because we haven't been entirely happy with what our roadmap would look like versus the cluster API roadmap. And add-ons, and yeah, the machines API is part of the cluster API, I think. And then the add-ons, currently when we rev an add-on, so if there's a new version of Calico or whatever it is, then we have to do a new version of Kops, and it would be great to break that link. So that's going on. And then generally some sort of project health things. I think Eric helped me with the builds for 1.10.0, and we'd love to get that be more automated. So we're going to talk to the CNCF folk about getting it onto their infrastructure, in particular for hosting the artifacts. So that's sort of the builds have to be automated, and we have to be able to put them somewhere. So that would be good. And then I can't remember who pointed it out to me. Was it Eric or Mike? That the roadmap hasn't been updated recently. But
probably both of us.
So yeah, so we I think we have an individual roadmap for etcd migration, but we don't have the actual roadmap.md file is neglected. So we need to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's a bunch of house cleaning on those sorts of things, roadmap and otherwise. So we'll get that done for 1.11.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. I don't know if anyone said anything else that they want to that they think is like a big picture like issue other than DNS. We'll put DNS in a different bucket for that.
When you're saying the automated builds and the CNCF infrastructure, does that include like the release pipeline as well?
Yes, I mean we have automated builds today on the technically I think it's Google hosted, but on the Kubernetes infrastructure. But it would be great to have, I think, a release happen basically by pushing a signed tag or something.
Right.
Or whatever.
Anything we can do to take the labor off of you, even if it is copy and paste.
Yeah, I mean it's not too bad, right? I mean,
right. it's not too bad, but there's only one person in the world who knows how to do it, exactly. And I have seen it done. And during that time, there were plenty of times when it was like, this might not be working. So it definitely would be great to get it more automated. And I'm sort of trying to help lead that charge with Justin. So
awesome.
I'm happy to help as well if you guys need anything.
Thank you.
Awesome.
I think like getting the final stages of the build over to Bazel will make our lives much better. Like we had an issue where like Docker was like misbehaving, and it would be nice to have the, in theory, more reliable builds that Bazel gives us. So that's something I'm going to try to tackle. I think that means the last remaining problem is our we vendored a Weave mesh library, which needs a Go build tag, and Bazel Go doesn't support build tags, so I'm probably just going to send a weird PR to like differently vendor the Weave thing or fork it in or copy and paste the code. I don't know. We'll figure it out in terms of licenses and things, but that sort of thing will help for the automated builds. All right, anyone else want to add anything to the list of?
Yeah, I'd like to add something. The AWS instance types are currently hard-coded into Kops, and if you want to add a new instance, let's say like the R5s right now, you have to wait for a new release. Is there any way we can move that out into like a secret or some sort of like, just move it outside of Kops so that we could just update those instance types and just have it work?
Yes, I think that's a great idea. Who was it that sent the
That was me.
Yeah,
so I wrote a generator. So one of the first, there's a lot of problems with the way we have it right now. One, if I spot checked a couple of them, and some of the data that we had in there was actually wrong. Probably just user error, computing ECU units to these CPUs and all that stuff. So I made a generator. I just rewrote it yesterday to actually regenerate that code. But your point is valid. Like it is a bummer. I think one thing we could do is pull that out into like channels, or the same thing we're doing with the add-ons. That way we can just update it whenever we need to. I have a PR open that basically will automate some of that we can use to move it to more automated, but you have to pull it from the pricing API. That's how I did it, at least. So I don't know. I think there's definitely a lot of room for improvement there. So I agree.
Yeah, we're doing something like similar to that with the cluster autoscaler, where we're pulling that from the pricing with the generator.
Yeah.
But there's also like another thing that kind of needs to be added with the AWS CNI plugin. You need to set max pods, and that's not something you're going to get from that. So if we want to add that to the instance types, it's not going to be able to be generated like that. We need a better way to do that.
Is there an API for that, Seth?
Sorry, what?
Is there an API for that information?
I don't think so. I think you calculate it based on like the amount of ENIs times the IPs per ENI, something like that.
Right, and
then you deduct 2 because you have the kube proxy and something else.
Probably the node itself, right? But yes.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
But the two pieces of information are not the ENIs and the IPs per ENI are not available via an API.
Not that I know of. I know they have it like in the EKS stuff. They have like this just in CloudFormation. They have a map, and it's not even like doesn't include everything. It's just like the most popular ones or whatever.
I do like the idea of putting it in a file like channels. It would be great if we could get it from an API, and it would be great if we could get it from a file rather than having to add it in code, right?
Yeah, I mean, even the ENI, the AWS CNI plugin has the same issue where they're hard coding it right now. So we could really try to find a solution that works across all of them, and the cluster autoscaler too.
Yeah.
Is the Seth, is the autoscaler pulling it like from the pricing API real time?
Not in real time, no. It's too much
Okay.
data for that. There's a generator, and it's not even automated. You have to run it manually. So whenever someone complains that there is an instance missing, we run it.
Okay, yeah, and that's basically what I wrote. All right. I thought it was a little risky for us to like start pulling from that and like break, you know.
And by the way, that the pricing API is not always correct either. There's been mistakes in the past with the amount of CPU or memory, and there's a lot of duplicate stuff because there's, it's the same machine but in multiple regions, and then there's different sales stuff there, so there's a lot of duplication there.
Yep, I saw that too.
Okay, I think that'd be a good thing to tackle, and yeah, pulling it doesn't. I don't think there's any real reason for it to be in code anymore. So it would be good to get that into a file at least, and maybe we can beg AWS to create a file, but otherwise we can certainly create one.
Okay.
It doesn't feel too onerous to have to regenerate a file, like when we see the announcement that there's a new instance type.
Agreed.
The fact that the API might be wrong is a little. That's a flying ointment. And Seth, I'm going to also put on AWS encryption provider as something that we want to get in. I think that's a good one.
Is that going to be like one of the first projects we're going to do with the add-ons?
I would like it to be. I think because we don't currently have a great we don't have an integration, so I think that'd be a great one to start with.
Okay, and is that going to be using Kustomize or?
Let's start with. I think we should start with what we need, and then so like start with the bare minimum, which is like we want to get it so that when you release a new image, that we don't have to update the Kops code, right? Mm-hmm. So there's the image name, and there's the idea that like the manifest itself might change, and so it would be great to have the manifest pulled out. And then I think the next step would be if a user or a cluster administrator wants to change things, how do they go about doing that? And so that's where I think Kustomize comes in. But I think that's sort of the third step. Okay. In my opinion.
So where do you envision that being moved out to? Is that just going to be like something that gets uploaded to S3? And you can modify it like an instance group?
Which are you referring to? I'm imagining that the reference manifest will be something more like our channels file where it's outside of the Kops code, right? So currently, for example, the manifests for most things, most of the add-ons are baked into Kops, and it would be nice to have that be updatable like we can update an image. Okay.
So it's going to be pushed to the GitHub repo, and then it will be pulled live from like that channel.
Yes, I'm sure there's a lively discussion about whether the GitHub repo is the right place to pull from, but some form of HTTP or HTTPS addressable like source that is not the source code, not the binary, I should say.
Okay.
Lots of people have very justified issues with like GitHub can be they can rate limit requests. How about that?
Yeah.
Whether they're doing it intentionally or not, I don't know. But there are certainly people that I think there was an issue today about like what certainly looks a lot like rate limiting. But it's less bad because it only happens on cluster create, probably. So it would not necessarily happen, like every time an instance boots. And so yes, in answer to your question, then I imagine if we need it when the instance boots, which I'm not sure we do, but we would end up copying it to the S3 or state store bucket or possibly the instance metadata. But yeah. Any other big topics, or should we move on?
Security groups.
This is custom security groups, right?
Yeah. To start out a clusterlet.
And this is not additional security groups. This is overriding the core security groups.
Correct. I'm actually trying to revisit those PRs right now because they're kind of outdated. So
we're in the core, I guess the core securities is right, yeah. And the use case is, so I actually saw one that someone said that they want to turn off egress. So by default, we have an egress policy to everything, which, we could also address by configuring the egress policy, but I don't know what is your use case.
My use case is I have a different team that creates those security groups, and they don't want an external tool managing those. So
yeah, that's totally common. I run into the same problem. Like, I think we should just make it so that we just overwrite, like, you can set a new default security group for all of our different resources. I think is very reasonable.
Yeah. It will be
security teams are painful sometimes.
We definitely have the functionality to validate it now. I think if you use load balancers with it, like, you will have surprising results because it will Kubernetes itself will reconfigure your security group, if I recall correctly.
So yeah, we also don't give Kubernetes permissions to do that. So yeah.
Yes. Anyway, yes, we can make it a worst case. We can make it a feature flag, like, I know what I'm doing.
And I figured we'd throw it under the life cycles, ignore or warn and ignore. So
that works. Good. Anything else?
I have another random question. Does anyone have a good solution for getting extra SSH keys onto nodes? I tried using like Cloud Init, and then it broke my Kops setup.
It's come up a few times, and I've always thought that the best solution would be a daemon set.
Okay. So you just run a daemon set that has a host mount, and then it just overwrites those files?
Yeah.
What happens when you delete that?
I would say it would add to the files, right?
Oh, so it would just run like a command that writes to the file instead of overwriting it?
Yeah, so this is, I think one of the reasons we didn't do this is because it feels like it's not really part of Kops necessarily, and it could be much broader. So like the dream solution I was imagining was that you would, well, you probably shouldn't be logging on anyway, but if you want to do this, you can like create an API type, a CRD for SSH keys, and have users that are able to log in to your clusters, and you would have a daemon set that watched that API type, and it would go and like write the .ssh authorized keys file, and possibly create users as well. But it feels like, we're sort of getting into a whole user management type thing that's, in my opinion, beyond Kops.
All right, sounds like a cool idea though.
It would be fun, right? It would be really good. I think gravitational or teleport might have something in this space. I don't know.
If you can run HashiCorp's Vault at all, it can solve that problem also.
Oh, because it could effectively do the same thing, but like with Vault as the source of truth.
Yep.
That would be good.
And then I had one more question. I ran into issue recently where one of my masters couldn't come up because AWS is out of on-demand instances for that type. So I try to switch it to another availability zone. Is that something that should work, or?
It won't work today because of the master amounts of volume, and the volumes in AWS are zonal. Mm-hmm. So you can't do that. It should work to change the instance type, right? So you could have just switched families, I think, mm-hmm. And hoped that you got lucky. I think with etcd manager it will certainly be possible. I haven't actually tested that in detail yet. And it depends. That sort of thing is the sort of thing which should be possible with etcd manager. We are likely to run etcd manager in the near future with a configuration that will be very conservative and try to stick to zones. So I think the most likely answer will be to try a different instance type in the same zone.
Okay, it wasn't a live cluster anyway, so I just added a new instance group and then deleted the old one and then just deleted all the volumes. And then it just came up as a new new cluster basically.
Okay.
But I was just wondering, like in production, if that would happen, like how bad it would be.
Yeah, I mean, I think I guess a new instance type, if you were running non-HA and a new instance type would be your easiest bet. If you're running non-HA and your whole zone went down, assuming you could get a snapshot of the volume, which is a pretty big assumption if the zone is down, you could maybe try to do some magic there. I don't think it's. I think the answer is going to be etcd manager will probably let you at some stage in the future restore from. Well, you have to do a command. We have to do the command to restore from an etcd backup. So etcd manager creates etcd backups in your S3 state store, and we should create a command that lets you like recover from one of those. It's not going to be automated because backups only happen every 5 minutes, let's say, and so you will always lose some data in that scenario. So it has to be someone has to push a button, but we can certainly make it push button easy.
Okay.
But I think it only applies to non-HA clusters because as long as you're, I guess it also applies to an HA etcd cluster where you have 4 zones and you want to switch from one zone to another, I guess. But yeah, we can start with, all right. But yeah, it's a good one to think about. Let's do etcd manager restore from backup dr zonal, e.g. zonal outage. Okay. Otherwise, should we keep going? Is there anything else? All right, next up. Is it Levi?
Yeah, I guess I just started working on OpenStack implementation this week. So I just had a couple of questions around autoscaling requirements. First off, I noticed both AWS and GCE have the autoscaler as kind of part of the core like operational flow. I was curious, is that a hard requirement for all providers, at least sort of longer term?
So I think you mean autoscaling group. So there's 2 things, right? There's autoscaling groups, and then there's also a Kubernetes cluster autoscaler, right?
Yeah. So I think it's instance groups is what the Kops object is.
Yeah. So we use autoscaling groups the autoscaling groups at least on AWS do 2 things, right? They both in theory do autoscaling and resource-based dynamic reconfiguration of the number of instances, but they also do disaster recovery. So if someone switches off all of AWS and turns it back on again with autoscaling group, your masters will come back. So that's sort of the real root reason why we use them for the masters. If you so a fun trick is always to take your Kops cluster and shut down all your instances, and it will come back. It might take a couple of minutes to come back, but it will come back. The autoscaling group launches the master, and it finds its volume, and it reattaches itself, and everything should recover. So that's nice, and that's sort of the root reason. When we do the cluster API and the machines API, we can rely on the cluster API for launching nodes. So you won't necessarily need there's no reason to have an autoscaling group for the nodes there, because if the master is up, it will launch new nodes to replace any nodes that have been lost, I guess. That's sort of forward-looking because I don't know if it actually happens yet, but that's sort of the requirement there. The challenge is going to be for your master instance, what do you do if someone shuts down the master instance? And that's where an autoscaling group could be useful. I don't know if there's some alternative, an alternative might be a Lambda function that relaunches a master if there's no master, or I don't know, something like that, or like a protected instance. I think GCE has a protected instance.
Yeah, I guess the reason I ask is the node auto scaling in OpenStack is typically handled by Heat as the component, and that's not always available on all installations of it. So I was curious if it was possible to do that maybe on the COP side of things, or if that needs to be on the cloud provider side.
So I think once we get the cluster API, it's not going to be a problem for nodes. The challenge is just going to be figuring out what should happen when you lose all your masters, right? Like even if you just have one master, you could presumably use the cluster API to launch more masters. But when you lose all your masters, I guess the question is what happens? And I guess a good answer could be tough. You relaunch, like do Kops, right? Run Kops, update cluster. It's not the end of the world. Like it shouldn't happen that often. And so if it does happen, then that's fine. And so I think that's what we had some vSphere implementation code. I think pursued that, and I think it's acceptable. But it depends. I think if you're writing one now, I would probably pursue that pattern. To be honest, I would assume that the cluster API is coming and do that. So I think your masters you would launch as instances, and you would assume that OpenStack keeps them up, or at least, we'll relaunch them, or best effort relaunch them, and then I would use the cluster API, the machines API, for launching those.
Okay, cool, thanks.
And you're familiar with the cluster API? It meets every Wednesday at sometime noonish in East Coast. They are. It's still relatively early, but I think people are starting to make progress in terms of actual implementations on alternate platforms. I don't know if anyone's currently working on OpenStack, but it would be a great place to start.
Great, thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'd love to see OpenStack, so thank you. Monty, you are up next. I saw your issue and I actually commented on it, but I don't know if you want to talk about it here, because it brings up a bigger issue.
Oh, sure. I haven't seen your comment yet. Thanks. But yeah, I mean, actually, I should back up. What I really tried to do was change the instance type to something that was twice as big and reduce the number of nodes by half. And so naively, I just changed that in the YAML file and updated Kops, and it immediately killed, half of my instances, because I just reduced the minimum or the maximum to half of what it was, right? I thought it would go through and do the drain and all that, but it doesn't. So the second time I went through, I tried what somebody suggested on the channel, which was go through, I drain nodes, and then I delete nodes. And what I found was that after deleting the node, it wasn't actually terminated in AWS. And so I went and terminated the node in the console, and immediately the scaling group put in a new node, even though the minimum was set to like 12 and max was 20. The desired amount was 20, and I don't know where that's controlled in the scaling group. So I've hit this problem where I don't know how to tell, tell Kubernetes, take that out of the Amazon, completely.
That makes more sense. The context makes more sense. So like the kubectl delete node, the comment that I made is kubectl delete node just unregisters it from the API, and it doesn't do anything in AWS. Okay. There's been chat about like some form of controller that goes and syncs the two. So if you do delete a node, if a node isn't registered, if an AWS instance isn't registered, whether it's because you deleted it or whether it's because it failed to boot for some reason, at some stage you should call time on it and delete it, right? There's no point just paying for a node that's not doing anything. Yeah. It's a little contentious because maybe people want to go look at what's going on there. But certainly you could have a controller that goes and implements that. But your actual, so that will probably happen as part of the cluster API, the machines API again. Your actual use case, though, what you're actually trying to do seems fair. And the reason, so you're right that most of these updates go through a rolling update, which would do the right thing. So if you just change the instance size, it would have done the right thing, I think. It would have.
Right. Yes, that does work. If I don't change the
Yeah.
number of instances, but I change the instance size,
It would force, it would force you to do a rolling update at that point. And then then your instances wouldn't get killed until they were drained.
But I think the issue is currently on a resize. We just resized the auto scaling group, which
it just changes the min and max on the expected values on the ASG, and then the ASG sort of does whatever it wants to and just kills things willy-nilly.
Okay,
right.
Yes, this is actually a good issue, right?
It's a little unpredictable. It's kind of a weird, like, I think it is sort of you do have a good point, because I think like it's pretty reasonable to expect kubectl delete node to do something useful, or at least something to do something. Like there should be like some way to do it. I don't have a proposal, but it is an issue. It is confusing.
At the very least, when we scale down, we shouldn't just delete the nodes. We should drain them first, right?
And reschedule our stuff.
That would be nice. And then it sounded like there was also an issue with the desired count, right, where it was somehow outside the min and max bounds, which I didn't even know was possible. But
the desired was at the max. It wasn't outside the bounds, but it was at the max. And I wanted it to be the min, but I don't see that there's any option in Kops to set what the desired is.
That's right.
So
there's not, and that makes so. I guess
that's because it goes through the auto, because you're expected to use the cluster autoscaler, I guess, which would like force that. So the cluster autoscaler manages that. You can set the min and a max through the Kops instance group, and then have cluster autoscaler set your desired, which is definitely confusing.
At least in AWS, there's a termination hook we might be able to use some sort of script on there that drains the node before it gets terminated. So
I think that would be cool. I don't know how much time we get on the termination hook, but that would be, certainly when we get the hook, we shouldn't just like ignore it, right? That doesn't make any sense. But
what would we want it to do? Would we just want, so if it were going to, if we got the termination hook and we just sort of drained it, that's pretty much all we need to do, right?
Yeah, and I'm not sure how different that is from what happens anyway, because I expect when we get this shutdown signal, I
think it's going to have to reschedule those pods anyway, so it's going to do something. It just may not be doing it as like prettily as I think it should.
Yeah, this sounds almost like something SIG AWS should kind of built into kubectl, or whoever really the provider should build into kubectl. Whenever those instances get a termination signal, they should automatically drain.
That makes sense. And then I think what we're doing in Kops with the resizing is obviously suboptimal at best. And this issue is a good one. It makes a lot of sense. I don't think once you're doing anything wrong, I just don't think we have a good answer for what the right way is. I guess so. If you had to do it, I would probably say you keep the min and max the same, so you're able to like explicitly set them, and then you look at, like, I have 20 nodes right now. I want to have it, so I go to. Yeah, it temporarily involves going to more nodes. I guess. I don't know. It's a mess. It's tricky. I was going to say, so one option would be you set the new instance type, set min and max at 20, and then reduce min and max stepwise.
Stepwise. Yeah.
No, I mean, and that's the way I have to. I mean, I rotate instance sizes all the time, so like you can do it, but yeah, it's like it's multiple steps. The way today. And if you're running the cluster autoscaler, that makes your life way easier, because then you roll over your instances, and you pay for an hour or two of the extra instances, but then your autoscaler scales you down when they're not being used.
So is that the cluster autoscaler? Is that an Amazon thing, or is that a Kops thing? I'm not familiar with it.
It's actually a Kubernetes thing.
It's a Kubernetes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
you can go ahead, Eric.
Oh, so I wrote a blog post actually, or a couple of my colleagues wrote a blog post that's about a slightly different thing, but I think would probably would help you to understand kind of how things are working in terms of like draining, coordinating, and like rescheduling stuff. And it's called like the bestest cluster upgrade. And I'll post it into the channel so that you can take a look at it. It might give you some hints about how to, because we basically turn off cluster autoscaler during that, and so it might give you some hints.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I added this as like something to think about in terms of our goals, and it might be this is part of the cluster API, machine API work, although I don't know. We'll see. But certainly, like today, what happens is when you just set the counts, all we do is we send that to the AWS auto scaling group, and we don't do anything smarter. And that is because I think it predates some of the drain code. So yeah, at the time we didn't do anything better, and we should probably revisit that and do something better.
Okay, should I file a ticket about this then?
I mean, yeah, you've done 5646, right? So
yeah, okay, I'll update it with the actual use case because I just kind of described the delete problem, but not the rationale.
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay.
That's a good one. Thank you.
I'll update that.
Thank you.
Although the one good news is, as of 110, COPS 110, we now drain CRDs properly, which is like a huge pain if anyone was using the etcd operator. So as of now, if you switch over, you won't get this crazy error rolling your cluster.
Yay.
Yay.
Thank you to whoever did that. Who did that?
I think you did that actually. I think you just updated the API, the Kubernetes API.
That wasn't really me then, but sure. Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, you know.
So it was done.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. And now our grand finale, DNS.
Yeah, I don't want to take too much time on that, but I think the discussion was huge if you follow the Kubernetes repo. And like people experiencing weird 5 seconds timeout on trying to resolve DNS, essentially on not only in COPS, but I feel like it's important to be discussed here as well. So it's in Kubernetes in the end. Actually, it's not even Kubernetes, it's actually the kernel. So there is not much we can do. But so what I wanted to add in this document is this blog post which actually I think came out today or yesterday, I have no idea, from Weave. And it's actually a kind of human readable description of the problem. So you don't need to be this IP table ninja to be able to understand that. I think it's pretty well detailed and explained. And so I would recommend like trying to get into this because like if you're operating a cluster, at some point someone will ask you, why do you have this timeout? And they're gonna want an explanation. and the other thing is like there's this issue which had been open like 10 days ago or something in the COPS repo regarding how to implement the workaround, which some people are implementing. And yeah, so this is where I wanted to go. So essentially the problem is to implement a workaround, we have to somehow run kubedns on every node. So this smells like daemon set. And we have to do it in a way that we don't use the service IPs, so the pod IPs, sorry. Which means we need something running like host network with a static IP or something. And we need, so we need something like that. There are a couple of workarounds proposed, but most of them require patching AMIs or something, which I think, in my personal opinion, should be not what we should do. So we can, of course, bake it into COP standard AMI, but like this, we would lose some flexibility. I don't know how likely it is. So one patch was merged into, I don't know, the kernel or something. I can't recall, but it's not perfect yet. And I believe it would take a while to be kind of okay. So, or be safe that we don't have this problem anymore. The nice thing is that we have some bunch of blog posts about it. We have easy way to reproduce it. So it's kind of not a mystery anymore. And this is why I think it's worth discussing or sharing ideas or what we want to do next to address this.
Yeah, and we did actually merge a feature flag into COPS 110, which allows you, so currently one of the annoying things was that COPS would validate the kubelet DNS server IP flag, whatever it's called, cluster DNS IP, I think. But it would validate and force it to be the same as the kubedns IP, cluster IP, service IP. And we basically add a feature flag that turns that off. So the idea is to enable people, to stop getting in people's way that want to try these things. And we can hopefully figure out something that works and get it a better fix that's more automated in 1.11. But yeah, the feature flag is there that, can't remember what we called it, but it's experimental cluster DNS or something like that. But if you set the feature flag, you can set the kubelet cluster IP, kubedns service IP. You can set the DNS IP to whatever you want, and then if you have a daemon set, you can try to interact with that. There is a nice repro. I personally have not been able to see the contract issue, though I have seen DNS failures, particularly on one cloud and not another cloud. I have to be careful. I can't be mean, but the more commonly used cloud seems to have more issues seems to have a higher rate of this test failing than on GCE, and I don't yet know whether that's because on GCE with Kops we're running like the COS image, or whether it's different configuration, or whether it's the networking layer. But it does seem that more people observe us on AWS, and I did see some on GCP, but not as many as I saw on AWS. So there's something going on. It's not entirely clear what it is to me, and I personally have not seen the contract issue myself. So I think it might be network, like it might be that UDP packets are fundamentally not 100% reliable. And when you drop a UDP packet, you get the back off and the retry and the 5, which manifests itself as 5 second delay.
For the record, I mean, I investigated this for weeks for my company because we got this everywhere. I reproduced it constantly. There's that issue where Thomas wrote a tool to test this, and I was able to reproduce both the contract and the other. But like, I tried every CNI provider we have. None, even the Amazon one, still had issues. I tried switching the DNS to core DNS, and I got around it by switching all of our repos from Alpine back to Ubuntu because of the muscle C issue that they have with contract. So, I mean, yeah, the weird part about this issue to me is like there's a few different manifests of it. It seems like. And it's not abundantly clear whether they're all related, but they all just result in DNS problems, about a 5 second delay, and yeah.
There are definitely multiple causes, right? I mean, I think Alpine doesn't give you the knobs that you can do with glibc, I guess, but the fundamental issue is still there. So like Alpine glibc just gives you some extra knobs to like mitigate and things.
Yeah, I was looking into the same thing this last week, and I saw there was another issue with all of the CNI providers because of some issue with IP tables that was patched recently. Something with full randomness or something.
Oh, I think that was the same thing, right? Was it not a workaround for?
We've came up with the workaround, yeah. I think.
I don't think it's been implemented yet, but I see there's an issue open with every single CNI provider for that. And then there was another thing with some sort of hash table in the Linux kernel that wasn't isolating by C groups. There's a bunch of them.
It is weird. Like I can take like an unloaded cluster, like just nothing but the standard ones, and I put one pod on with the test workload that Thomas wrote. I think it's Thomas, and it's doing 100 requests per second, and you see it basically going off every minute or so on AWS, and certainly within 5 minutes you'll see it. And for me, it wasn't in contract. This is with KubeNet. Like there's no, like, I just don't know. I also tried iPerf3, the UDP tester, just between 2 Amazon Linux nodes. Like no Kubernetes, Amazon Linux 2, no Kubernetes involved, and like you definitely see UDP packet drops, which is like, I mean, I think that's UDP packets do drop, right? And so it felt like the DNS thing was happening more often, which points to like there being a secondary cause, but I don't know. There is a general effort looking at running some form of local agent. So an answer could be, for example, you just run kubedns as a daemon set. And you figure out a way to talk to it locally. And in theory, UDP over localhost is reliable. And so then all your all your Kubernetes domain name resolutions should never leave the box and should be pretty reliable.
And to be honest, it's not such a bad idea because, like, I mean, this was like now a year ago, but I can't remember how many times I was paged for it. Like, for example, the master losing connection to etcd, and like I figure like why people don't have this problem, because a lot of people run etcd on the same node as the master, so they just talk to localhost. So sometimes you have a more HA reliable whatever setup, but but the less reliable one doesn't wake you up in the night, so it's also fine.
Yeah, the obvious downside of Kubernetes on every node is it's Kubernetes is not very lightweight. It watches every service and possibly some more, and it keeps an in-memory copy. And so I think the people are thinking about like running an agent that effectively would give you some of those benefits while like forwarding to a heavier Kubernetes.
Plus, it would increase the load on the API server, which I'm not sure how significant it would be, but depending on the size of the cluster, it could be a problem.
Right, size of cluster and churn of endpoints, right? It's gonna, and I think, what was I gonna say? I think there was also a proposal, I think in the Kops issue, to run DNS mask on the local machines, which I think the benefit comes from caching, but honestly, I don't really know. If someone wants to tell me how to get the contract failure to happen, that would be super useful. I don't know if people have seen it with like CNI providers or just generally. I might just be looking in the wrong place. I don't know.
I don't know. I used Calico and I was able to see it there like pretty quickly. But I'll try to get the configs that I used.
I mean, yeah, it's
just
surprising that other people are reporting that. I'm like, that's the one figure I haven't seen.
Right.
But I mean, in general, it's pretty good that at least we're talking about it, because this was one of those hidden secrets of Kubernetes with only the masters of production knew, and like at least it's getting like over all the channels and it's getting some popularity on the internet. So that's good. This is the way to fix things, right? I mean, even though it's not properly Kubernetes, but we've seen it all around the world. So
yeah, and it does feel like it's gotten worse, and I don't know why that would be, but maybe it's just like people are starting to notice it more, or I don't know. But I would have been great to get a fix into 110, but I feel like we got into Kops 110, but we got in the thing that lets people run experiments at least and gets Kops out of the way. I hope. I'd love to have done better, but that's what we were able to get in. And so yeah, if we are able to keep experimenting and figure it out, I guess this could be a SIG network topic in terms of the underlying issue. And I think there's actually someone at Google working on like looking at the space of like what should what should run on, and if we were doing local node agent, what would it look like? But I don't know if they're going to talk to SIG network or what the plan is. Anyone else want to vent about DNS? Good vent.
Thanks.
All right, we have one more item on the agenda. Rodrigo, is Kops GCP GA? It is sadly not GA because I'm trying to figure out whether to do IP aliases, and I think I probably should do IP aliases, and I'm going to write that down because it will be a good thing for me to make sure it works. GCP IP aliases and GA. But yes, it is currently not, and it should be.
Perfect. I just had people asking, so.
Yeah. To be clear, it works. The issue is we probably want to turn on IP alias. IP alias is a new networking mode a different networking mode for GCP that is more like the AWS VPC CNI provider type thing. And the transition from Kubernetes or any CNI provider to IP aliases is non-trivial.
Can we introduce IP aliases for now and then come up with a way to do the migration later, or do you just want to come up with a?
I don't think we. I don't know how people are actually running it, but yes, we probably will just make it default, and technically we're in alpha, so we're allowed to do that. I don't know whether people will. I don't know whether we'll find out how many people are actually running Kops on GCP and how they feel about it. Like, how often they're churning their clusters and things. Migration is the hard bit, or is a hard bit. So it would be nice to just turn on IP addresses and just make it GA.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Cool. Anyone else for anything more?
One more question. Do we support T2 Unlimited?
Do we support I hope so. Is there some problem?
I don't think we have it in our instance in our machine types, do we? It may not be.
I don't think we do.
I don't think we do either. That's a good point. I don't think there's anything special that needs to happen, but yeah, we need to fix that up. I have on the validation thing, my PR for the validation on NVMe image types. Like, I don't know. There's no. It would be nice if we had some metadata about these things. Anyway, I have to run for another meeting, so maybe we'll talk about that another time.
But Seth, if you send the PR to add the type, it will be, well, it's not going to be in 110.0 now. But we can cherry pick it.
Once now that we're getting good at releasing things, we can do 110.1 very quickly. So
we'll do 110.1. It would be nice to, it would be nice to do it on our own terms, but yes.
Absolutely.
I don't think is it actually a separate instance type, or is it just a T2 that has unlimited enabled on it?
It's just a flag.
That's a good point.
It's on a regular T2.
Yeah, it's a regular T2, and then you can just burst like however. Do you set an initial size for it, or is it just like do you say like I want a T2.large, but it can go unlimited, or?
So normally they're burstable machines, and then I think if you set unlimited, they just charge you like a fixed rate per hour of CPU that you go above instead of rate limiting you.
Oh, so this would probably be a new option then, right? Like,
yeah.
Okay, so that's not quite.
Okay.
I don't know whether we would, like if you just tweak the launch configuration, I don't know what happens. Never do that, but I don't know what happens. You might want to try it. I'm gonna put that on the list of topics, but yeah, it feels like any last call, or everyone enjoy their weekend. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Thank you so much for joining Kops Office Hours, and see you in 2 weeks.
Have a good one,
everybody. Thanks, everyone.
See ya.
Thanks.